to me, if I want to find out what happened in a disputed issue, I'm going to want to know, well, what do the people who are in the room say? What do the people closest to it say, if that varies from whatever mainstream historians say? And on this tape, it's Cliff Carter just saying, he had visited with Johnson recently, and he really regrets that Johnson gave that order to kill Kennedy. He says it point blank. He goes, well, he shouldn't have had Mac Wallace kill Kennedy. If I had to guess right now who the shooters were.
I'm so excited today to have you guys here for this conversation. Matt had me on his podcast recently, and so I was so excited when he was willing to come on my YouTube channel as well. Matt, welcome to the Jess Cannell YouTube channel.
Thanks, Jess. Appreciate you having me on, and thank you for all of your kind, thoughtful comments on some of my video catalog. I've noticed you've been putting them in there as you've been going back listening, so really appreciate that. It's cool. It's always nice to get a nice comment, but when you get a nice comment from like a big deal such as yourself, it's even better. Thank you.
Well, I'm not a big deal, but I think people are latching on because I'm willing to learn and admit what I don't know. And I think there's a lot of people who have a heap of fascination about this case, but kind of don't know where to start. And so we're actually going to get into a little bit of that today. But I did want to introduce people to your podcast. About how many downloads do you have now?
We're just shy of 2.5 million.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have done amazing, but I also as I've gone back and listened through your catalog, I've gotten a better sense of what you're trying to do. At first, I think I just started out with your channel a while ago. YouTube started feeding me your channel, so I'd listen to a random video here or there, but then I listened through your JD Tippett collection, and I learned so many things that helped me get a grip on that. But then when I went back and started with episode 1, I realized the sheer size of what you undertook, which is systematically and through the research, going through and examining all the different, chronologically through the case. So yeah. I do want to recommend to my listeners, if you are trying to get a grip on the JFK case, and really, I know many of you have time to listen to long form content. So Matt's podcast is an excellent place to go to get just systematic, very detailed, and very well cited information about the case. So I really appreciate that about your podcast, Matt.
Thank you, Jess. And, when I started it, all I wanted to do was to go have a repository for being able to say, okay, these people say this, the counterpoint is this, but the counterpoint to that is this. So I just wanted to publish all of the perspectives in one place. Now, the thing is, and the challenge I have is, if my whole thing is I'm an objective podcast and I'm going to, nothing but the facts, ma'am. If that's what I'm doing, it's hard to, as you get into it, to not be persuaded by what you've already seen, right? So I didn't try to say that I have complete objectivity. But I do want to lay out the facts for everyone. So as those facts are laid out, I then sort of make a call in real time based on what I think about the facts. That doesn't mean reasonable people cannot agree, right? So especially on little specific issues here and there. So and then, I when I first got started, the only podcast that I was aware of when I decided I was going to do this was the podcast called The Lone Gunman with Rob Clark and Joe Borelli. And I've since become friends with those guys and did a show with them. And I think they're actually really solid researchers. The way that they were doing it was kind of starting with super zoomed in, you know what I mean? And I found that to be helpful for me as I was super deep in it, but I still was looking for a repository, a source that would start from square one, start us from the beginning. And I think the problem in the conspiracy world is people are like, well, everyone knows the CIA did it and there were 17 shooters and all these things, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It's well, hold on. The whole thing is incredibly very disputed. So you got to go point by point by point. And the thing is, even when I get to the end of the road, I'm not at the end of the road yet, but having finished 2 seasons, it's clear to me that there was some sort of a conspiracy involved here, just because of all the shenanigans around Oswald, et cetera. There's a lot of stuff we'll get into, but I look, people. There are people who feel differently, and they passionately feel differently. They're the minority, but they raise facts that need to be addressed. So you can't just go, I don't want to talk to you, or oh, you're a Fed, I don't like what you're saying. You have to go, okay, well, that's a challenging fact. Like, you have to look at these facts and admit these are challenging facts, and just be honest with yourself. So, but I think there's room in the JFK assassination sort of media sphere for a lot of different things. It's great. Like Jeff Crudell does his long form with let me make sure my emails are turned off. Here we go. Sorry, work offline. Jeff Crudell does his long form with a little more personal commentary. I try to keep mine 30 minutes or less. Try to have music and just keep it sort of as general appeal as I can, which is not always easy to do. And then there's Who Killed JFK, which is very produced, and there's only a few episodes. I think that's a good entry level, but
yeah,
I know David Hoffman, the producer of it, and I got to interview Rob Reiner, and I don't mean to speak ill of it. It's just a totally incomplete picture, which you really very difficult to have anything approaching a complete picture in 10 episodes. So, but the point is, there's a lot of good stuff going on out there, and of course, everything you're doing, and I think it's a good time to be talking about this.
It's fascinating. I think it's a topic that's never really gone away in people's. I feel like as I go back, I've recently made contact and become friends with the Grodins, but as I've gone back through his story, I've looked at the ways his story traces from the very day of the assassination when he was 18, but then the showing of the video and the committees in the 70s that reinvigorated interest, and then in the 80s there was kind of the lead up to Oliver Stone's movie, and then in the 90s that exploded some things. And I just see how, as I go through even the literature, it's like there's these revivals, but the revivals show the interest has never really gone away. And I feel like the people still feel this deep sense of, I've been thinking about it lately in terms of like a family story. Like if you know that your family, that the deepest things that are true about your family go back to a divorce in 1972 or something like that, or the family split where so-and-so stopped talking to so-and-so in the 80s. You can't tell your whole family story without going back to that fracture and examining what happened. And I feel like that's what we're doing in a sense, is like we're looking at our national family and saying, this is a huge fracture that even though we're 62 years on, it still affects us. And so that's a way that I've been thinking about it lately that's helped me, is just examining the story is still important. Even if we can't nail down, this was the exact shooter in this place, and this was this shooter in that building. Maybe we can eventually get to where we can nail down some of those details. But even if we can't nail down every detail, that the story matters. So I know that's where we kind of find ourselves here, is we're hearing the story. Okay, so I have a question about you. I wonder, since you've been doing the podcast, is there one facet of the case that was very murky to you that is now very clear? Is there something that stands out for you?
I mean, yeah, so there are many that would compete for that title. Probably Russia. I would say the medical evidence, Russia, but first and foremost, Mexico City. Because Mexico City is very confusing, and it's not really it's never actually been given a mainstream treatment. No one's covered Mexico City. Maybe it was mentioned in passing in Oliver Stone's film. But Mexico City is kind of the whole game to understanding the plot that was in play, in my view. Like to understand, yeah. So
tease that out a smidge. Like, give us maybe in a paragraph why you think that's so essential to understanding the case.
Sure. Okay. So we're told that the official story is, in September, the end of September of 1963, right before, a few months before the assassination, Oswald goes to Mexico City. And what's he doing in Mexico City? Oh, he's trying to get a passport to go to Russia through Cuba. He wants to go to Cuba first and then on to Russia. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, the Russians are not going to approve his passport because it's a long process and it takes like 6 weeks and it has to be sent to the Russian embassy in Washington D.C. And so long story short, um, that's the story. He goes down. Oh, look, Oswald was trying to flee to go back to Cuba and Russia. Look, he loves Cuba. He's a Castro supporter.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
wait, I'm going to go Billy Mays. But wait, there's more. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, and that is that not only was Oswald there, Oswald, this is the official story, met with a guy named Valery Kostakov, who's the head of assassinations for the KGB. Okay.
Mhm.
So the official story is Oswald met with the head of assassinations for the Russian KGB. Huh? It's
Mhm.
like so so this is the story that's circulated and it can be used if you're someone who believes Oswald acted alone. You would look at this and you go, "Oh my gosh, what was happening? That could have been nefarious." But you just
Mhm.
kind of, history sweeps it under the rug. But the problem with Mexico City for the official story, and this is a devastating problem that there's not a good answer for. Some things there, like I said, there are some things where I'm like, I don't know. That's a good point. No
Yeah.
good points on Mexico City. I've been to the bottom. I've looked at everything. I've dug through everything. They don't. So there was there's 4 or 5 FBI agents that are there interrogating Oswald in Dallas after he's arrested, and those agents were given a tape recording that was supposed to be Oswald in Mexico City, and they listened to the tape recording, and all of the agents said it wasn't the same man. They were also shown a photo, and they said it wasn't the same man. Now,
Mhm.
that tape then disappeared. And here's the kicker: the CIA says it never existed, and all these FBI agents were hallucinating. But the problem is, Hoover himself told LBJ this that,
Yes.
hey, it wasn't really Oswald down there; it's an imposter of Oswald.
In one of their
Uh,
first conversations,
yes,
like LBJ is barely president, and they're talking about Oswald in Mexico.
right, exactly. And
Yeah.
then, by the way, that's the same tape that's missing 12 minutes from it.
Yes.
That we know was intentionally erased.
Yep.
Okay, so back to why does this matter? Why is it so earth shattering? When you see that Hoover and LBJ are having this conversation about the fake Oswald, and then that doesn't come up again. Hoover has a memo that supports it. Yes, in fact, there was a fake Oswald. He sends the memo to 5-page memo to LBJ, sends the same memo or a similar version of it to James Rowley, the head of the Secret Service. There's never a retraction. Hoover never goes, remember the time when we thought Oswald was impersonated? We were totally wrong about that. Oops, like that never
Yeah.
happens. In
Yeah.
fact, in fact, months later, Hoover writes in the marginalia of another memo, this reminds me, or something like he references the CIA's double dealing and dirty deeds like the false Oswald story in Mexico City. That's a quote from Hoover.
Mm.
He's talking about
Wow.
the quote false Oswald story in Mexico City. So, uh, you know, to me, like the Occam's razor, I suppose, if you want to say that, would fall on if you have an imposter, someone's impersonating you. You're probably not a regular. This is probably not just a lone crazy person.
A
Given that
poor,
someone's
a poor
impersonating
man.
them, right? Exactly, with no money. Given that
Yeah.
someone's impersonating this man, who's he impersonating them to? Foreign intelligence agencies.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so okay. So what does it reveal? What's the big picture? The big picture, I think, is that there was a CIA plot to have a false flag World War III that they
Mhm.
could blame uh, on Castro and Cuba and say, hey,
Mhm.
look, guys, we have to do a preemptive war on Cuba, or we have to do a first nuclear strike on the Soviets because they killed our president. What are we going to do? Sit back and do nothing? So the people would demand that, which means they're going to be counter strikes. This is the whole. So here's what's amazing about that. That appears to be what the CIA and perhaps the generals and maybe LBJ, who knows, whatever. The point is, whoever is the ultimate culprit, they had to
Mhm.
have gone through the CIA to set this plan in motion. Now it's possible. Is it possible that Oswald had some other thing going for the CIA and it wasn't just the false flag, and maybe he had some other operation for the CIA? I don't know, maybe, but you would really think that if they had an innocent answer, they would have brought it forward because it looks pretty bad
Mhm.
already.
Yeah, it
Like
does.
I don't think they're doing all this to hide. Like, no, Oswald was our agent, but it was a different op. Shh. If there was that, I think they would have gone with that. Just using
Mhm.
my own common sense. and judgment, which different people have different variations of that. So anyway, the point is, LBJ, instead of, once he sees this, he goes, "Oh my gosh, we're going to have nuclear war." Now, did he start it? I don't know. I'm not commenting on whether or not LBJ is a plotter or a planner. That's something I'm still trying to uncover.
Yeah.
But it appears what happened is LBJ and Hoover and Katzenbach got together and decided, hey, we're trying to not go to World War III. CIA's trying to pull us in. We're not doing that. They kind of got together and made sure, let's just pin on Oswald to keep us out of World War III. And that served the dual purpose. You ask what's so important about the whole assassination, the biggest case. Here's why Mexico City is the biggest. He could use, LBJ and Hoover could use this threat of nuclear war to get anyone to do anything, and they sleep perfectly at night. They're not going, "Oh my gosh, I'm an accessory to a murder of killing the president." Instead, they're going, "I'm a hero, keeping our country out of war."
Oh, that's such a good point.
And people,
that is the reasoning that LBJ uses to Chief Justice Earl Warren as for why he should do it. Warren did not want to get into it. I was just looking last night. There's a chapter called "The Reluctant Justice," I think, just talking about Earl Warren's reluctance to take on the case, and not just reluctance, but complete resistance. He did not want to do it. And LBJ used that line of reasoning, like, you have to, because otherwise we could end up in nuclear war with Russia. And this has to protect all Americans. And so Earl Warren reportedly left that meeting in tears, kind of like, okay, fine, I'll do anything, because he loved his country so much, but out of fear for nuclear war.
Yeah, and there's the audio recording of LBJ talking to Richard Russell about that exchange is pretty interesting. I mean, again, like, if you put on a filter like glasses and like to make you see the world as Oswald as the lone nut, I guess the way you dispose of that fact is so in HSCA report, there was some colonel who came forward and said, "No, everyone was mistaken, and we don't even have the names of any of the FBI agents. We couldn't even find them." Okay, well, Hoover has the memo; it's right there. Did they not try? And again, my whole thing. So like that's their counterpoint is, well, no, that's been debunked. It hasn't been debunked. What are you talking about? I mean, it's you got LBJ right there, and you have Hoover. Hoover never retracted it. LBJ never talked about it again. You would think he'd go, "Hey, man, what's going on with this?"
Yeah.
I think it was a mistake for them to publish the transcript. People always go, "Oh, someone would have talked. Oh, people can't keep things under wraps that long." Correct. They didn't. They failed. They had all kinds of mistakes. One of the biggest mistakes was allowing the transcript of that phone call to exist, and not when they deleted part of the tape, but they still kept one of the most incriminating. I mean, that gives it away. That Mexico City gives it away, in my view. So
yeah. Agreed. Well, I mean, that kind of leads into what we're going to talk about today, because you've been in the weeds with LBJ. And so I want to hear and learn from you. I know that my viewers would love and have a lot we can glean from you. So I asked you for a list of the top 3 to 5 things we should know about LBJ, and you came back with those rather quickly. Like, you had those right on tap. And so the first one that you said we should talk about is something that we've kind of hit on this channel, which is his connection with Bobby Baker and then Billie Estes. And you mentioned specifically the financial kickbacks that he got. So let's get into that first. This is number one of the things we need to talk about to understand LBJ is kickbacks from Bobby Baker and Billie Estes.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll say at the outset, like any historical figure, LBJ was a person. So, I think you could, if you just listen to my series, you're probably going to go, "What a monster." But he had the capacity to be nice in individual instances if it suited his ultimate purposes. But anyway, so financial kickbacks. LBJ's program was basically, I am available as your politician for hire, whatever you need. Okay. But you gotta, if I'm going to give you my premium service level. This is not how he phrased it. This is how I'm phrasing. His
Right.
premiums, he had basically had two levels: political bribe from campaign donors, and they got service and they got help because they needed money. I'm sorry, they needed things done, and they were the big money. I'm talking about like H.L. Hunt, Brown and Root, etc. But then you have businessmen who are working with the government, trying to get government contracts, and Johnson's more involved with them, almost like a business partnership. And he's going to help them because it makes sense why he would help his financiers of his campaign. He needs their money. He wants them to be happy, right. Whatever. But he's helping specific smaller business people who are not yet huge donors to his campaign. They would become that eventually. Billie Estes in particular. But so his deal was 10%. He wanted 10% off the top line royalty of every dollar that came in from someone's business. And if they gave him 10% off the top to Cliff Carter, he's the one that took the money, then LBJ would do whatever they needed. So, the TV show House of Cards is based on a British politician. It's actually a British show. But the Frank Underwood character, to me, the whole time I'm reading LBJ, it's just Frank Underwood is screaming out at me. It's very, very almost the same person as the character played by Kevin Spacey. But so yeah, Bobby Baker was smaller time. I mean, basically LBJ became the Senate Majority Leader. There's all these little perks to go along with that. He hires Bobby Baker, who had been in the Senate a long time as a page, and as LBJ said, knew where the bodies were buried. And Baker then uses his power to decide which vending machines get put in which government locations to get himself into the vending machine business. Oh, look at that. And then he partners up with this defense contractor lobbyist, Fred Black Jr., to basically get vending machines in defense industry manufacturing plants. And you may go, vending machine, who cares? I mean, come on, please, nickel and dime. But this is before company cafeterias, and it's the heyday of manufacturing.
Yeah.
So you got around the clock shifts, and so vending machines were making a lot of money back then.
And it's a cash business.
Right, it's a cash business. So anyway, that's Bobby Baker. Bobby Baker also opened a hotel, and I mean, Bobby Baker's main thing was that he ended up being a problem for Johnson was he started the Quorum Club, which Ellen Romesh was a hostess there, and he introduced her to Kennedy, and she went to the White House pool parties, etc., all those things. And that then got him in trouble because they thought she was a spy. That was never proven. But yeah, this was interesting about Romesh is at the same time there's a British scandal going on called the Profumo affair, where the Minister of Defense had basically an affair with a woman who was also sleeping with a Russian naval guy. And then ultimately the prime minister resigned over that. The prime minister, not the Secretary of Defense. And this is a month before the Ellen Romesh scandal hit. So they were saying, "Oh my gosh, is someone going to resign? What's going to happen?" And then, of course, what's funny about that is RFK, who hated LBJ, and he actually got the Bobby Baker investigation in motion to try to get have another easy out to get LBJ off the ticket. There were other potential arguments he could make too. But RFK had to go to J. Edgar Hoover with his hat in hand and say, "Hey, man, I know I told you should really go out. We should look at LBJ's dealings with Bobby Baker." That's what he told the Senate Majority Committee. He knew better than to ask Hoover because he knew Hoover was LBJ's boy, right? Like from way back. So RFK goes to Hoover and asks him to convince the Senate Majority, the Senate leaders, majority and minority leaders, to stop the investigation that he asked them to start because it was now getting into Ellen Romesh. Because LBJ, as soon as the investigation came to Bobby Baker, LBJ told Hoover, "You got to focus on Ellen Romesh." So the LBJ and the Kennedys hated each other, and LBJ and JFK were able to have a cordial relationship, which speaks to JFK's maturity, I would say, and
I agree.
like Bobby was a less not as mature as JFK. I mean,
He was
Bobby
8
was,
years younger. Is that right?
yeah,
Yeah.
he wasn't able to keep his mouth shut at the right
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he didn't care about the right things, but he didn't know how to fake deference. See,
Mm-hmm.
just because JFK could sit there and listen to LBJ talk, he would know, okay, this guy's pompous, like you got to let him do his thing, and that's why LBJ thought they got along okay, even though he hated Kennedy,
Yeah.
hated his policies.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He had a somewhat of like a human rapport with the president, but not with Bobby.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's really
So,
helpful.
and then,
So that gets us into though the second one, which you said was the
yeah,
relationship with the Kennedys. So let's first of all let's talk about how he got on the ticket.
yeah. Well, that's a disputed issue. I would say so. I'm not saying I have the absolute truth, but
Yeah.
if to me, if I want to find out what happened in a disputed issue, I'm going to want to know, well, what do the people who are in the room say? What do the people closest to it say? If that varies from whatever mainstream historians say. So the mainstream answer, if you look in a textbook, is Lyndon Johnson was from the South. The South is a different place than the North. You need people from the South to win an election.
Yeah.
And then if you want to get real deep with the analysis, they might say Kennedy was Catholic, Johnson was Protestant.
Mm-hmm.
He needed it to balance out the ticket. This is basically the argument.
Yep.
But the thing is, you have to understand, and look, well, this is fun to do. Fun may not be the right word. Interesting because it so mirrors politics today in so many ways. But we have to understand, like the Democratic Party in 1960 was a completely split party. It was very, very split. So half of the party were sort of Southern Democrats. Did not want to move forward on civil rights at all.
That's right.
They actually were very pro business. They did not support social programs. They viewed them as sort of being pro communist. So you have that part of the Democratic Party, and then you have sort of the progressive part of the Democratic Party, which is more similar to what the Democratic Party is today. And Johnson was from the very conservative, racist, very, very pro-business wing. And Kennedy was from the progressive, pro-civil rights, more of a social safety net wing, I would say. And so that was the problem. Like, it didn't make sense. Kenny O'Donnell, one of Kennedy's advisors, reportedly, this is what he wrote in his book. O'Donnell wrote this. He was there. He's what he said happened. He says that he told Senator Kennedy at that time, "What are you doing putting LBJ on the ticket? This he's against everything that you believe in. What are we going to tell everybody?" And then Kennedy basically said, I'm healthy. I'm 43. He's not going to serve. I'm not going to die. We're good." We know that on the day of the assassination, he was joking about being shot.
Yeah.
So he, I think it was present in his mind. Now, okay. So back to how did Johnson get on the ticket?
Yeah.
That's one argument is geography. The sort of alternative argument put forward by insiders in Kennedy's camp and Stuart Symington is that Symington was offered the nomination. Bobby Kennedy was then basically Symington's offered the nomination. He's like, "I want you to be my VP," and Symington says, "I'll be your VP." Okay, good. We have a deal. This is at the convention. Then LBJ and Rayburn visit with Kennedy. Now we don't know, is this in person? There's some sort. This is a mystery. Is it an in-person meeting? Is it a phone call? We don't know. Sometime between that evening and the following morning early, Kennedy said, "I have no choice. I have no choice but to replace Symington with Johnson," and he had to send Bobby to go. He told Symington that he didn't have any other choices. Symington was asked about it, and he's always said no comment. Okay, so now there's I forget the guy's name off the top of my head. It's in my episode in LBJ, but there's an insider who says that right after that happened, JFK came down and told him point blank, I had to change it to LBJ because because Johnson and Rayburn said that they were going to tell everyone that they're going to basically expose all my affairs. And
Yeah.
so Hoover gave LBJ this information to
Yeah.
use.
Yes.
Rayburn was politically aligned with Johnson and wanted Johnson to have that position. And so they strong-armed Kennedy into putting Johnson on the ticket. That seems to be the most reasonable thing. That doesn't mean this is a separate conversation from the assassination.
Right.
But
Right. Yeah.
there was no discussion of LBJ. He was never in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, after that, and then especially you have him telling his aide this, and you also have him telling Evelyn Lincoln this, and his secretary, and she says who had been a secretary since he had been in the Senate, or maybe since the House, but
I think 12 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think she's very credible. The other gentleman whose name escapes me at the moment is also credible. So that's what I land on, is that it was forced on Kennedy by Johnson and maybe Hoover, but really Hoover was providing the dirt to Johnson, I believe.
The intel. Yeah. That's what I've come across as well, and I think that's right.
Yeah.
RFK then tried to go back behind and basically you don't actually want it, right? Like he went to Johnson and had a follow-up conversation trying to take the VP slot away from him, and he wouldn't give it up, and so that's that. We have Johnson as the vice president. But
that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing that you mentioned was the Henry Marshall murder. So set that up for us. That's a piece of LBJ's alleged history, we'll say. Maybe you can elucidate that.
This gets into the whole Mac Wallace conversation.
Yeah.
And so the Henry Marshall murder is something that, let's see, where are we right now? We're on Bobby Baker. So I've recorded 2 more episodes that are not yet out. So I'm trying to think about this. So the Henry Marshall conversation is getting into, well, is Mac Wallace LBJ's hitman? So, who's Mac Wallace? Mac Wallace is a guy who some people say was on the 6th floor on the day of the assassination. There is a supposed fingerprint that establishes this. Mac Wallace wore horn-rimmed glasses. There's a guy named Richard Randolph Carr on the 7th floor of the county administration building who sees a guy with horn-rimmed glasses on the 6th floor wearing a brown sports coat, and then sees that guy outside getting into the same Nash Rambler that the other guy who ran down the hill got into. So there's certainly reasons to not throw that away, but we got to have a lot more if we're going to say that.
Right.
So who's Mac Wallace? Well, Mac Wallace definitely killed a guy named John Kenser. So that definitely happened. Now, who's John Kenser? Well, this is fun. A whole little aside that most people don't know. Mac Wallace, so he did know Johnson. I just wanted to zoom out a little bit. Right. In the conspiracy world, it's taken as a given that Mac Wallace was Johnson's hitman. He's just going around killing everyone. But we have to establish that because it's all completely disputed, and people on the other side are just sitting there laughing at this. They think it's silly. So the question is, should they be laughing, or is it maybe they have a good point, or is it a closer call? I just want people to understand all the facts. That's all. Don't shoot the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger.
No. But I think it's great, and I think you probably know this from my channel, but I actually try to really look at things skeptically, and I come at things with a really fresh perspective because I don't at all know everything, and so I'm learning in real time. So I try to give people a fair shake from each side. So I appreciate that you do that.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure there are people who would say that I don't give a fair shake, but I'm doing my best.
Sure, same for me.
So we're on. We're talking. Okay, Mac Wallace. All right. So anyway, Mac Wallace was given a job at the Department of Agriculture. He worked on LBJ's campaign. He worked on his Senate campaigns over time. He was one of the guys that went around and helped people get small business loans. And LBJ ensured that they got the loan. Local small businesses. Wallace would then go to those businesses after the loan was dispersed and grab 10% for LBJ, even though the small business had to repay all the loan. That was one of his jobs. Then he got a job working for the U.S. Department of Agriculture as an economist, which is what his degree was in.
Right.
And that was through LBJ in Washington. And one of his things LBJ asked him to do there was to keep an eye on Josepha Johnson, who was LBJ's sister, who was a little wild. Well, he ends up having an affair with Josepha Johnson. His wife is back in Texas. And Josepha goes back to Austin, where his wife is also. And get this, both Josepha Johnson and Mac Wallace's wife, whose name was Mary Andre, both of them had a simultaneous affair with this guy, John Kenzer. So Mac Wallace murders Kenzer, but he did it because he was sleeping with his girlfriend and his wife. Like that's people say he did it to, silence somebody about something. No. Mac Wallace, yes, he was affiliated with LBJ, but he killed Kenzer because of the
personal
his wife
passion.
and his girlfriend. Yeah,
right.
I mean, please. I mean, that seems pretty obvious. Now, here's where it gets interesting. At the trial, at Mac Wallace's trial, supposedly LBJ was there at a hotel getting real-time updates, but there's one source for that. It's not that very well sourced, so it also doesn't matter. Put that aside. Maybe LBJ's there, maybe LBJ's not there. Who cares? Here's what we know: all of LBJ's lawyers are Mac Wallace's lawyers.
That's right.
So the lawyers LBJ used for his 1948 election and for other just general criminal issues, Polk Shelton and the other guy's name is John Kofer. Those are LBJ's lawyers. Now, counterpoint is Mac Wallace had to take out a loan from his family to pay his legal fees, and so Johnson didn't pay the legal fees. But what do we know about Lyndon Johnson? Would he have paid legal fees for someone? He'd be like, no, pay your own legal fees. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So
he's a narcissist as far as I can tell. I'm not a psychologist, but everything about LBJ just screams narcissistic behavior. So it's all about him, never about the other person.
Right. So okay. But what's interesting is Wallace gets he's convicted of murder, and then he gets a 5-year suspended sentence, meaning that he never had to spend time in jail as long as he didn't have another felony in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
So
bringing in a little bit of Texas, I believe it's still the only murder in Texas that's ever received this suspended sentence. I can't say that with absolute certainty, but at the time, whatever it was that I read, it was. So
and
crazy.
Jurors came forward after the fact and said that they were threatened, and they apologized to the family of Kenzer for the verdict and said that they didn't think they had any choice. I think LBJ is all over that one, and I think LBJ. What I mean by that is he came to Mac Wallace's defense with his to the extent he could. Now, this whole thing about people threatening jurors. I don't know. The jurors said they were threatened. If you want to believe they're not threatened, that's fine. No, I don't have a backup transcript of someone saying I threatened jurers. Yes, although that seems to happen a lot in this case. Like there's some sort of exclamation point to put on it. I don't have one of those here. But anyway, so here's the Henry Marshall murder. All right, so Billie Estes, who was another one of these. I mean, he's basically Bobby Baker times 100. Okay, because Bobby Baker's messing around with millions, which in today's money is multiply it times 10 basically.
Right.
But Billie Estes' net worth was $400 million in 1964 dollars in 1964. $400 million. So and LBJ got 10% of that. Remember, LBJ's net worth was I think 25 million when he was president, and he had only ever worked in public service. That's cool.
Yeah. Wow.
So of course he bought the radio station, et cetera, yada yada. But anyway, Henry Marshall. So everybody thinks that Mac Wallace killed Henry Marshall. People go, Mac Wallace killed John Kenzer, and he killed Henry Marshall, and he killed JFK.
Right.
Okay. Now here's the thing: he did kill John Kenzer. That's all true. The stuff about LBJ being his lawyers, or LBJ's lawyers being involved, is true. Jury being threatened, that's true. But Henry Marshall, we don't have any evidence that the only evidence we have that it's Mac Wallace is there's a couple of things. We have Billie Estes' testimony. Now, if you believe Billie Sol, it's a slam dunk. It's Mac Wallace. He says Mac Wallace did it. He was there for the meeting where they decided they were going to do it. And oh, by the way, this is really important. Who's Henry Marshall? Well, Henry Marshall is investigating Billie Estes, his cotton allotment schemes. It's basically just legal maneuvering, which was arguably legal. Billie Estes did some things that were illegal, but he found a gray area with the cotton allotment scheme, and then this agriculture department regulator, Henry Marshall, said, no, you can't do that. And then they firmed up the rule to make sure that he couldn't do it. I don't want to get into what it is exactly because it's kind of detailed, but long story short, Estes was about to get in trouble and come down, and Estes was the main 10% royalty guy. He was Johnson's primary franchisee. You know what I mean? So anyway, the idea is that, Marshall was coming at Estes. If you look at who benefits the most from Marshall being murdered, it would be Billie Estes. Okay. Right. So because, so anyway, Estes, so Marshall's killed, and the only proof that we have that it was Wallace, and let me say this. At first, it looks like but he's got carbon monoxide poisoning, and he also was shot 5 times with a bolt-action rifle. So everyone with a brain knows that you can't be shot 5 times with a bolt-action rifle when you're already poisoned with carbon monoxide, please. So right. It was eventually ruled a murder, but it was not ruled that Mac Wallace murdered this man. So okay, what's the proof that it's Mac Wallace? There's a drawing that the gas station attendant said. Basically, they put together the sketches, and that drawing kind of looks like Mac Wallace. The person who, the killer, stopped at this gas station and asked for directions to the Henry Marshall Ranch, and then came back the next day and said, well, you gave me directions to the wrong Marshall, but I got my deer license or whatever. During that time, so the day of the murder and the day that the guy would have come back, Mac Wallace is in California, and his brother and his nephew had come to visit Wallace and his son and his new wife in Anaheim, and they spent the day at the beach, and they spent the next day going to Disneyland. Now, and by the way, when is this documented? This is in the Dallas Morning News, 1984. Okay. So if we are to believe that Mac Wallace killed Henry Marshall, we have to believe that his son and his brother is in on it, and they're making this up after the fact, after he's dead. So for me, it's not established that Mac Wallace killed Henry Marshall. Now, is it possible that he did? It's possible. I'm not saying he did it. I'm not saying definitively he didn't do it. I'm just saying there seems to be more evidence that he did not do it than there is that he did do it. It's just people just take it as a given, and it's not really a given, is all I would say. Now, is it possible that he didn't kill Henry Marshall and he was on the 6th floor? These things are all possible,
Sure. So. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things even that I'm realizing, like, as I look at the conspiracy to kill, can be a totally different thing than the conspiracy to cover up after the fact.
Yes,
like
definitely.
Really not letting one piece of evidence automatically lead to the next, but zooming back out like you do so well of like, but wait, what do we actually know? Which dots are actually connected with evidence, and not just like, well, because of this, because of that, then we get here and you end up with a wonky final analysis because you're assuming too many things. So I appreciate that. Right. Okay, so you mentioned the fingerprint on the 6th floor. So let's talk about the fingerprints, because this is one of the big pieces of evidence that people point to place Mac Wallace potentially in the JFK assassination.
So Oswald's fingerprints were on some of the boxes in the set on the 6th floor. However,
but not in that corner. Am I right? In that?
There were a couple. So okay. Oswald's fingerprints were on some of the boxes, and he had a couple, like he had like a palm print and like one other print on one of the boxes that was in the sniper's nest area.
Okay.
Now here's the thing though. Oswald worked on the 6th floor.
Right.
They were putting down new floors.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to move the boxes around to different areas. So the likelihood that Oswald would have touched a box up there in the last week or two. I don't know how long, fingerprints last on cardboard boxes. It's weeks, I
Mm-hmm.
believe.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That's a pretty high likelihood. So it's meaningless that Oswald's fingerprints are on those boxes. There was a fingerprint that they could not identify.
Mm-hmm.
When they looked at all the fingerprints, and that one was later taken up, and I forget the exact details of it. This is something that I'm in the middle of researching right now. I'm about to start
Okay.
writing this episode, so
Okay.
my opinion is not fully formed on this.
Okay.
But a guy named Nathan Darby, somehow, I believe a researcher got it to him, and I forget who it was exactly, but we'll cover it. But Nathan Darby was an FBI expert fingerprint analyst, and he said there were 15 or 16 point matches between Mac Wallace's fingerprint and this unknown fingerprint.
Mm-hmm.
And he was given to him blind. It wasn't like, hey, we're gonna tie these things together. So he followed the appropriate protocol. Now,
right.
Years later, there have been multiple other fingerprint experts who have said that either they disagree that it does match, or they go, you couldn't have even done an analysis on this because you were working from a picture of a picture. That's the other argument. So on the issue of fingerprints, there appears to be a dispute among experts.
Okay.
Is how I would phrase it currently. And so I don't know about that. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to just keep zooming. Joan Mellon has a book called Faustian Bargains. And a lot of the, people who are certain LBJ did it, hate that book because she kind of poo-poos the idea of, of all this stuff I'm talking about Mac Wallace and the Henry Marshall murder. These are things I learned from Joan Mellon's book. But then I went back and cross-referenced and checked. Wait, was this really in the Dallas Morning News? Oh, it was. Okay, well. So that's the fingerprint. And I'm sure I have the tape on there, right? Is the tape the next conversation point?
Yeah, you do. And
okay.
One thing I want to say just before we move on to that is I really appreciate your willingness to do this. And I think it's what we all have to do if we're going to be honest. I remember Grodin talking about how initially, the whole Billie Lovelady photo that was supposed to be Oswald. And everybody pointed to it and said it was Oswald in the doorway. And Grodin said, I wanted it to be Oswald. And he even said he wrote it in a couple of books. He thought it was Oswald. And then he went to Lovelady's house. Lovelady showed him the plaid shirt. And lo and behold, it was Billie Lovelady in the doorway. And so he said, I had to retract it. I had to show it. In his later books, he does show that actually, here's the shirt. Here's Billie Lovelady. It's really him. And I think if we're going to be credible researchers, we have to be willing to do that, to reconsider with new information. And what you're doing is actually considering before you even arrive there, which is a really nice place to be. To maybe you have a personal leaning, but then as you get information, you can put out information that you feel like you can stand behind. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, look, on the fingerprint, I'll say this, like in the world of sort of mainstream, the most well-known JFK researchers, the Jefferson Morleys and Jim DiEugenios of the world, Larry Hancocks, etc. They don't believe that the fingerprint's legit. They don't believe that LBJ is a quarterback of it. They think LBJ was trying to salvage his presidency. They think he welcomed it and he was stoked about it, and maybe he was told about it in advance. But they don't. But this whole idea that LBJ is putting people in place and like he's the one running the plot itself, that is not a position that's held by any of the sort of mainstream researchers. However, I will say that doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it. You know what I mean? And and that doesn't mean they're right about everything. And I don't. If someone just says something dismissively to me, that makes me want to go look at it, especially after COVID, when you just believe everything. I don't believe anything anyone says until I've seen it with myself on undisputed issues. And
skepticism pays off.
Yeah, so you just have to, and I also think like you'll never. That's why I wanted to cover everything. Like I covered, even the driver did it theories. I'm going to cover Israel did it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Anything that people are talking about enough to get to get traction or to like become part of the zeitgeist. Like, I think we need to address those theories. And because if you don't address it, what people do is they go, aha, somebody's over the target, right? So
right. It grows. I mean, that is the truth of it, that I think the model of American government is let all ideas come out into the light. Don't suppress speech. Let speech be free so that then people are free to evaluate what has been spoken. But that ugly ideas grow in the darkness. And if we suppress speech and it hides away on 4chan or a rogue Reddit thread, and people aren't talking about it in the light, then it can't be seen in the light, and it can't be healthfully dealt with. So yeah, we gotta deal with the things that are there. That's right.
Yeah. Amen. Battle of ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So the tape.
Let's talk about the tape. So, okay. So, if you're just watching this, you're probably looking at me and going, all right, this guy definitely thinks LBJ didn't do it. So he's just covering it so he can check that box off. Well, hang on. Hang on just a second. This tape that came out is wild, and it's enough to make you just got to be open-minded to all the scenarios given the tape. So let's talk about this tape. What is it?
Yeah.
It's supposedly a 1971 recording of a conversation between Billie Estes and Cliff Carter. Yeah. Cliff Carter is LBJ's money man. So he's the one that, Billy Sol and Bobby Baker, and I'm sure there's some other folks, paid the 10% royalty to. Mm-hmm. So Cliff Carter is the in-between fixer. He's the guy. Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, Cliff Carter would go on to be the president of the Democratic National Committee for a period of time. So supposedly Billie Estes had been making lots of tapes of people as an insurance policy. And on this tape, it's Cliff Carter just saying, he had visited with Johnson recently, and he really regrets that Johnson gave that order to kill Kennedy. He says it point blank. He goes, well, he shouldn't have had Mac Wallace kill Kennedy. Like he says at that point blank that Mac Wallace gave the order. So okay. So let's talk about the tape itself. Well, could it be a fake? Could it be, so the authenticity of the tape is a major question. One reason to think that it is authentic is that this same tape has been mentioned for years and years and years and verified by other people. A guy named Kyle Brown, I believe, was also there and said, or he said he heard the tape after the fact, and he said what was on the tape. And the description that people give of what's on this tape is literally verbatim what is on the tape. Yeah. Now, where did the tape come from? How did it become unearthed? Billie Estes' grandson found it.
Yeah.
So
and he said, so in an interview, he talked about that the next generation of kids preferred for it to be buried, and they didn't want to talk about it, but that his generation of the grandkids, that at least a couple of them have decided that actually, no, this is American history and we need to bring it to light. So, yeah.
I would like to see, I reached out to Shane Stevens. I'm trying to get him on the show. I would like to, he's not gotten back to me yet. Hit me up, Shane Stevens. But anyway, that's Billie Sol's grandson. I'd love to see independent third-party verification of this tape. Like, if we can prove that this tape existed in 1971, it's the way that it's recorded is consistent with the recordings in 1971.
Yeah.
If that's true, then it's like, well, now you have the tape, but what about all the other evidence? So let me just say this too about this whole Mac Wallace and the sixth floor thing. People have to understand. The main reason people think Mac Wallace was on the sixth floor is the fingerprint, but really Billie Estes' testimony. Okay.
Yes.
In 1984, in the Robertson County, Texas grand jury, when they were trying to determine whether Mac Wallace was killed or whether it was a suicide, he said that Mac Wallace was a killer, right? And then later he writes a letter to the DOJ saying specifically Mac Wallace killed Kennedy. But the problem is, Billie Estes says Mac Wallace killed Kennedy from the grassy knoll. He says Cliff Carter told him that Mac Wallace fired a shot from the grassy knoll. Not that he was in the Schoolbook Depository building.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that's not consistent with the story.
Hmm.
So it's a mess to me. My guess is I'm going to land on inconclusive, leaning towards Johnson not being the quarterback of it. But
Hmm.
you cannot disregard the tape. The tape gives me pause, and I'll say I'm also, before I wrap up Johnson, I'm going to do an episode on Texas oil. I just got done reading H.L. Hunt biography, which is very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Hunt seems to be involved in some small parts here and there in the case. So
Hmm.
I'm about to read a Murchison biography.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll see what ends up happening, but I don't know right now. But we have all these things that don't seem to fit together. Is the challenge?
It's a lot. And some of the early researchers, like I've heard, I haven't actually read it in his own print, although I have his books, but I've heard that Penn Jones believed it was up to 9 shooters who converged in Dealey Plaza, which feels like a crazy high amount to me. But then a lot of people feel it's 3, 4 in there. So in that kind of view, are we looking at there are multiple players and everybody puts a few in the kitty? Like, how does that work? If that's the way it happened, then you've got
Uh,
an overseer, but with many different parties contributing a shooter.
yeah, yeah. That's the Philip Nelson theory. Philip Nelson wrote probably the best uh, book on LBJ as it relates to the Kennedy assassination. It's called LBJ, the mastermind of the Kennedy assassination. He kind
Yeah.
of gives away what he thinks. It's very well cited, so even if you don't agree with the ultimate conclusion, he's just it's some books are better cited than others. So
Mm-hmm.
his conclusions, there's not a lot of citations there because he's kind of
Mm-hmm.
putting together his what he thinks, but everything up to that is extremely well cited. But Nelson thinks that everybody had to put in a chip, and
Yeah.
Johnson's
Yeah.
chip was Mac Wallace. But like, let's think about that. If you're, I mean, wouldn't you want to not put someone that was associated with you? I mean, Mac Wallace was, for enough people, he
That's
was
a good point.
associated with LBJ. That doesn't
Yes.
make any sense to me.
I think
To
that
be honest
might be
with
the
you,
best argument for him not being there because it's
right?
way too easy of a dot to connect to the number 2.
I mean, if you want to look at shooters, here's some, the biggest one, the smoking gun. You want to smoke here? There's so many smoking guns. Sorry,
Yeah.
but you want to look at something that's never been answered that nobody has a good answer for. Go ask Mr. Fred Litwin. Shout out, Fred. What's up, homie? Go ask him about the dark complected man. You know, the guy holding his fist up,
Right?
who then goes and
Yes.
he sits down on the sidewalk next to Umbrella Man, like they're waiting on their moms to pick him up from soccer practice. Uh,
I love that.
yeah, it is. That's how they look. That Listen, this man. So just for your audience, this man who held his fist up.
the whole
Oh,
the whole view of the guys sitting there, just everything happens, and then everyone's running toward, pretty much everybody goes towards the grassy knoll, and these 2 jokers sit down.
yeah. Well, they sit down, and they're not just anybody. The Umbrella Man is pumping his umbrella up and down. Okay,
Yes.
and then the guy, the dark complected man, has is holding his fist up in the
Yes.
sky at the moment, right dead square in front of where the president is, and he's
Yes.
holding his fist in the sky. And then he sits down, and now this is disputed. People will say, "You're crazy, Matt Crumpton. Go look it up for yourself." He
Yeah.
sits down, and it looks like he pulls out a walkie-talkie,
Sure
talks into
does.
the walkie-talkie, stands up, puts the walkie-talkie into the back of his pants, and walks under the overpass. Never heard of again, never seen, never identified. Are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So there are other people with walkie-talkies too. Lee Bowers saw someone driving around in the parking lot with a walkie-talkie. You
Yep.
know, so it's anyway. That's a big one for sure. If you want to look at what's going on in Dealey Plaza, we also have witnesses. I believe Lillian Mooneyham, Amos Ewens as well, who saw a darker complected man who was balding, at in the sixth floor window. So the idea is the most credible idea to me is that there would be a spotter and a shooter. And I don't. if I had to guess right now who the shooters were, I have not covered that. That's something I will comment on. I'm going to cover everybody. We're going to cover James Files. We're going to cover
Good.
Lucien Sarti. We'll cover all these people.
There you go.
But anyway, if I had to guess right now, the most credible information would be that what Danny Sheehan says, and Danny Sheehan is a guy who was a lawyer for. He worked for what's the guy's name? He was one of OJ's lawyers. Oh man, I can't think of the guy's name off the top of my head. He was based out of Boston. I'll think of it later. I don't know why the name's escaping me. But anyway, so he worked for this big lawyer, famous lawyer whose name escapes me at the moment. And that lawyer was on the CIA's list of law firms that could be used by CIA assets. And they were the lawyers for James McCord from Watergate when he found the check in his when he had a check in his pocket, and the CIA needed to get the check. Well, Sheehan says that check was to a bank in Mexico that was related to expenses for the Kennedy assassination, and he knows because he was told that. So now here's where it gets crazy. F. Lee Bailey is the guy's name. It just hit me. The lawyer's name is F. Lee Bailey. Okay, so Bailey also represented Santo Trafficante, the mob boss, and Trafficante told him point blank that about what happened with the assassination. So the attorney-client privilege just told him what happened. Now didn't tell Sheehan, told an investigator, to be clear to the haters, told an investigator who then told Sheehan. Okay. Anyway, he says that basically some of the Cuban exiles that were working on Project ZR Rifle to try to assassinate Fidel Castro turned the operation on Kennedy and used all their training and everything to kill Kennedy, or to kill Castro, but instead killed Kennedy with it. Specifically, they trained for the assassination at the Murchison Ranch, Clint Murchison's ranch in Oaxaca, Mexico. The lead trainer was a guy named Rip Robertson. He says one of the shooters was a guy named Felix Rodriguez, I believe, who hilariously, Felix Rodriguez was on the Danny Jones show. If you're familiar with Danny Jones, he's got a big show that's like interviews people about parapolitical things. It's called Concrete, but just search for Danny Jones podcast. So and watch Sheehan on there. Felix Rodriguez is on Danny Jones, and then Sheehan's on Danny Jones like a week later, saying, one of the shooters was Felix Rodriguez, and he's like, "Oh, I just had him on the show. I should have asked him." So anyway, and Danny Sheehan spent his whole life in the public eye. Now there are people who go, Danny Sheehan's a Fed, he's a plant, yada yada yada, bibbity boppity boo, but I don't have the energy to assume everyone is a part of some conspiracy unless there's a fact that leads to it. Yeah. So to me, Danny Sheehan's pretty solid. And I've had dinner with him once, and I also spoke to him again a few months ago in Washington D.C. He was at the hearing when I was there in April. And I'm trying to have him on the show here probably sooner rather than later. But he's either the guy who knows exactly what happened or he's completely fabricating things. But given his history and his stature, I would not immediately discount what he says, especially since it confirms what a lot of other people have said.
That's very fascinating. Okay, so I think the last thing, we're running up against time, but I think the last thing is just that Jackie thought LBJ did it. Any others you want to mention?
Well,
or at least reportedly.
Yeah, William Manchester interviewed Jackie candidly, and she agreed to the interview in exchange for it not coming out for like 100 years, I believe, which I think is going to be like 2066 or 2067. Right. That's not subject to the JFK Records Act. That's a private agreement. So anyway, people who are privy to that interview say that the thing that's being hidden is that Jackie thinks LBJ did it. Now, look, LBJ was a dirty, filthy creep. If you listen to how he talked to Jackie, some people listen to that and they just hear, well, that's old timey talk, and that's just how. But it's like he's like, I want to take care of you, and it's like,
It is gross.
yeah. But there's that. Now the Russians, the Soviets wrote a memo that was later declassified and given by Boris Yeltsin to Bill Clinton in the '90s that lays out why they think LBJ did it. They think LBJ quarterbacked it. Okay. Um, so there's a lot of other LBJ little tidbits here and there. E. Howard Hunt in his confession, which is sort of not exactly a deathbed confession because he ended up living longer, etc. He puts LBJ at the top as well. Now, E. Howard Hunt doesn't even have Alan Dulles on his chart at all. So it's like, is he? Yeah. And he says that he goes, I was involved, but as a bench warmer. Okay. So, we'll get to I'm going to get to the E. Howard Hunt thing eventually, but, if you're someone who thinks Oswald did it alone, why would E. Howard Hunt be saying these things at all?
Right. Why fess up to that?
And then what they would say is he's a crazy guy and he wants to sell books. The answer is always crazy and books. And if you believe that everyone is just crazy and trying to sell books, I think that would help you continue to sleep at night and maintain your worldview. That makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. But then there's people like, Aquila Clemens and Lee Bowers and others who did not appear crazy and did not try to sell anything. And in fact, pretty quickly disappear. There's others in the case that are like that who were key witnesses that then pretty quickly fade away.
Almost all of the key witnesses didn't write a book.
Yeah.
And those who did, like witnesses who write books, it's like you got Madeline Brown. It's like I understand a lot of people think that Madeline Brown is not credible. But so she wrote a book. Who else? It's like most of the people who write books are not primary witnesses. They're not like fact witnesses. Right. For example, Vincent Drain, the FBI agent who laid out how the fingerprints were not on the rifle at all, and basically gives a story totally contrary to the official story. He didn't write a book. Would we just throw him out? Right. Because he establishes that, wait a minute, there's no fingerprints on Oswald's fingerprints weren't on the gun. Oswald's fingerprints were on an index card that was sent like 7 days later.
Yes.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. Yep. So, good example. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for your time and for laying all this out for us. It's been fascinating. I love this discussion. I could do it all day, but we don't have all day. So I appreciate you giving up time on your family vacation and making time to do this. It's been really fun.
Well, hey, thanks, Jess. Appreciate you and appreciate what you're doing. And I'll look forward to speaking again for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Take care, Matt.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
Bye-bye. Okay, all right.